Welcome again to Hack Your HazCom. We are at day 2 of the AHMP, the Alliance of Hazardous Materials Professionals. Day 2 of the summit here in lovely Louisville, Kentucky. With me is my esteemed guest.
Esteemed, wow.
Esteemed,
okay.
yeah. I use that in a very liberal sense.
Yes,
but
very much so.
This is Steve Laughlin, and he's the owner of CJ&K Training. Well over 30 plus, maybe 30
right? Mumble through that.
Years of extensive EH&S experience and all things that. So happy to have you on today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
We've known each other for years, so it's embarrassing that it's taken this long for me to come on. So.
This is new for me too, but I've been wanting you. You're one of my white whales to have on this, so
okay.
I much appreciated that.
Yeah, no, my pleasure.
So the reason I have you on today, you had a great parody song you did yesterday at lunch, and you used some under the tune Lola.
Correct. For you young people, you have to Google that one.
Absolutely, yes.
The Kinks.
The Kinks. Look that up. So go ahead and expand on that.
Yeah, so it was actually a bit recycled because I had done something similar at the conference back in 2011, I want to say, in Austin, Texas, and the committee had reached out to me and asked me to do the same thing, and I was like, well, I don't remember all the words, so I'm going to have to rewrite them. So I had to, I managed to get PFAS into one of them, just on the fly. But yeah, so Lola was my OSHA tune.
Where you spelled out the words.
Yes, instead of LOLA, it's OSHA. Yeah, so the songs are they're goofy, they're silly, they're kind of fun, but it's just a segue to get into the subject matter. And in the song, I mentioned safety data sheets, which has been a bane of my existence, and why you and I chuckle every time we see each other, because it's two different sides of the same coin kind of thing. So I'm usually griping about it when I'm doing training classes, complaining about them. And I always come to you when I have questions about them. I'm like, dude, why is this like this? Like, what? Just griping and bitching at you about the quality of them. So yeah, it's sore spot for me, only because I've grown up my entire career on the response side, the spill response, and the lack of information that we get. And it seems like they're getting worse and worse and worse, rather than better and better and better. And,
right.
In 2012, when we thought, GHS came along, and everybody's like, oh, all right. And the only thing, in my opinion, the only thing that really came out of GHS was the consistency in the formating.
Yes.
But the quality of the information is still as awful as it's ever been, if not
that's
worse.
Unfortunate. As a guy who does this, it hurts my feelings, but I get it, and I feel your pain. You're not the only one that I hear it from.
Yeah.
So tell me more, like the real world you
get. So what I've always come to you about, in the presentation yesterday, I make fun of the stupid stuff like the appearance and the odor, and I've said for a long time, I picture somewhere in the world, there's got to be this guy, there's this conveyor belt with chemicals that come down the conveyor belt, and there's a guy who gets to grab the bottle and goes, sweet, agreeable, mild. I want that job. I think I would be great at that job. I had, over the years, I've seen SDSs. I saw one had a chloroform-like odor.
Oh, my.
I'm like, any of you taken a nice hit of chloroform lately? And I was like, what's that smell like? It smells like chloroform. Out you go. Or, I had benzene-like odor, right? Who the hell knows what benzene smells like, right? It's kind of preemptive. So, the good ones are the ones that give you, gasoline-like odor, or, something people can equate to. That's minor stuff. The big stuff for me is, and on both sides of my life, on the spill response side, the lack of disclosure about what the chemicals are.
Right.
And look, most responders are not bright people. I mean, look what we've chosen to do for a living.
Right.
We're not the sharpest knives in the drawer.
Yeah, right.
We don't have chemistry degrees. That's for damn sure.
That's right.
So, the chemical list itself isn't really all that critical to the hazmat team, right? They don't care. And, I've joked in the past, like, if you put toluene, MEK, and acetone out in front of most people, they're going to sniff all three containers and go, it's paint thinner. You get somebody like me, and I'm like, that's the toluene, that's the MEK, that's the acetone, because we know the difference.
Right.
So it's not so much the chemical specific stuff, but just the, when they say flashpoint, not available. Well, what the hell are you talking about? Anything can be flash tested. How can you get away with on an SDS saying, we don't know what the flashpoint is? Well, have it tested and put an answer down. For me, that's the frustrating part when when pH not available, right?
The
Now, look, if
simplest
there's
test.
no water,
Mhm,
I
mhm.
get it,
Right.
right? But then say not applicable, not available.
Right.
When you say not available, it implies you could have done it and you just chose not to.
Right.
So yeah, so those, on the spill response side, those are some of the issues. On the disposal side, in the waste disposal industry, we're seeing a huge lockdown, if you want to call it that, much more detailed request from the disposal world, and they hold all the cards because it's privatized. It's not run by the government. So no disposal company has to take your waste, and they don't need a reason why they don't want to take it. They just, I don't like how you look,
Right.
is enough of a reason, right? So what we're seeing is, and I'm lucky enough that I've been doing this long enough, most of my friends are pretty high up in these companies, and I've hung out and asked these questions of them, and I was talking to the approvals person of one of the major disposal companies, and he said, look, Steve, he goes, we're getting the heat from the insurance companies and the regulators. Like, this is not our call. We're getting heat from these people about needing to be more complete on these profiles. That's where the 100% comes from. And I said, yes, but what happens when I have a safety data sheet where they won't tell me anything about it?
Right.
And I'm supposed to tell you what it is. Well, I don't know what it is because the company who made it doesn't have to tell me what it is. Like, do you not see the disconnect? And he said, well, I see it. He goes, but it's not my problem. And I understood what he meant. I was pissed, but I understood it because he's like, look, dude, my responsibility is to be able to safely run a hazardous waste disposal plant. And if you can't tell me what it is, I'm not putting it in my incinerator.
Right.
I don't know what could happen. And I looked at him and I'm like, so what do you want me to do? Lie to you? And he goes, as long as you're willing to sign the profile. I'm like, well, that's messed up.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know what else you want me to tell you, Steve. And I go, I get it, but it's definitely a sore point.
Sure. But yeah, I mean, with that kind of potential block in the road, what do you want what's your ideal situation?
Well, I mean, I understand the reason behind trade secret proprietary ingredient. I don't understand why we allow them to not tell us what it is. I get why you're not telling me the percentages, right? I'm not, and look, I'm sure there's somebody out there that would love to do it, but 99% of the time, nobody's trying to make your stuff. No one even wants to steal your recipe.
Right.
We just need to know what it is. So I would love to see some legislation that said you have to disclose what the chemicals are, at least by family. I mean, I would even, if you just want to say alcohol, but you don't want to tell me which one, I'm fine. Like, alcohols are alcohols from a spill responder point of view. That's all I need. I know what that is. I know what that is. Surfactants, I call them fluffed words, right? Those are the things I don't want to see.
Right.
Don't tell me it's a surfactant. Don't tell me it's a binder or some nebulous term that means absolutely nothing, which is back to the disposal side. I'm telling my buddy, I'm like, so what do you just write down? You want me to write down surfactant and binder? He's like, yeah, as long as it comes to 100%. So I really would love to see us get to a point where you have to tell me all the chemicals. You don't have to tell me the specific chemical, but the class or the family it's in. And you don't have to, and I don't need percentages. Like, I just need to know what it is. And we were talking with the Chemtrack guys, like the preeminent call center for this kind of stuff. And it was funny. I had just met John yesterday, but years ago at this conference, they had a booth, and I had asked the woman, I said, hey, do you have an issue with people calling you and you don't even know who they are? She goes, yes, goddammit. Sometimes she's like coming over the table at me. I'm like, oh, wow. Ma'am, I don't even ship anything. Calm down. She was like, yes, it's a huge issue. And so they've, they're their own worst enemy because their number has just become so synonymous with spill response that people are calling their number. And so I'm talking to John, and he said basically the same thing, which is, if you say no hazardous ingredients, well, the chemical itself might not be hazardous, but to our speaker this morning, gentleman, I forget his name, Robert Bullet.
Oh yeah, Robert Billett, the lawyer who discovered PFAS and went after DuPont.
Right, and prompted the movie Dark Waters. Phenomenal movie, by the way. I should start. I'm a huge movie buff. I should have this like movie set list. Like, here are the movies you need to watch. If you're in the EH&S industry, Promised Land is great. Civil Action, amazing. Oh, that's like the worst one of all of them. Right? It's not bad, but that's what everybody goes to. Right? It's Aaron Brockovich. I'm like, oh, they're so much better. But, to his point, those are unregulated chemicals, and we now know just how awful and horrible they are for the environment, yet you, to this day, don't have to disclose it on a safety data sheet because it's not a hazardous ingredient. That's crazy that we can get away with not having to say what is in this stuff. So that would be my wish list. That would be the ideal situation. Is I don't need the percentages, just give me the chemicals or at least the families, and I could live with that.
And then I hate to throw another complication at you here, but there's, of course, the GHS rules. You've got these thresholds, 1% or 0.1%.
Yeah, and where they came up with those, you probably know better than I do.
Yeah, I mean, long story short, it's not wanting to test everything on animals, right? That's one reason. And just finding that seemed to be a reasonable threshold. But as we know, back to PFAS, it can go well below that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, it's crazy to me that we're setting standards that there isn't even a machine capable of looking for that number. Like, I forget what state it was, but somebody passed an ordinance that you have to test at this level. I'm like, there's not a machine on the planet.
Right.
You might as well just say 0.
Yeah,
like, what are you doing?
Right.
Like, why are you even wasting my tax dollars doing this crap? Like, it's insane to me. Yeah, I'm not naive. I get the rub. I get the compliance piece. I get the legal side of it. There's so many, interconnected parts and pieces, and I realize that I'm not privy to all of them or in tune to all of the things that are going on. But you got to set the bar somewhere.
Right.
So I don't even have a problem with that. 1%. We know that it's not necessarily a given that it's safe. That's the other frustrating thing, is that people look at these SDSs as the end all.
Yes.
I think we were joking about, we could call it the book of OSHA,
book of OSHA,
which will slide, conveniently in between Luke and John, and everybody can read it there. And it's written much the same way. People read it and don't know what they read and walk away shaking their head going, could somebody explain this to me?
And cite verses from it.
Oh, well, so this is my other line in my opening training classes. So just so you know, my father was a minister my entire life. So I'm a preacher's kid.
Okay.
And yes, sadly, everything you've ever heard about us, it's all entirely true. But I had this revelation about how much Dad and I have in common. We have congregations. They are mostly there because somebody made them come.
Right.
They come because they don't want to read the book for themselves. Right. They just want somebody to tell them how to live their lives. People think they know what the book says, yet have never actually read it for themselves. I find that one fascinating, by the way, that people think they know what the CFR says, yet have never actually seen the document of any kind. And people can read the same thing and walk away with very different understandings. It's actually terrifying how similar the regulatory stuff is to the Bible.
Right.
But yeah, circling back to the SDS part, right? That's I understand you have to draw the line in the sand somewhere, right?
And I've told others that I've had on this show is basically it can't be all things to all people, right? Originally it was for the workplace. Now we're expanding it to transportation or toxicologist or all those sections that are below past section 10. They are suddenly not even required, optional.
Right.
Yeah. But that's the bane of our existence.
Yeah. Yeah, I for the life of me, don't understand why transportation is on a safety data sheet. It's got nothing to do with it. And the further complication on the DOT side is that there are so many variables for DOT application that go way past what the product is.
Right.
How much of it are you shipping it? What mode are you shipping it? And there's no way anybody could reasonably fill out Section 14 of a safety data sheet on trans and really do it justice.
Yeah. Yep.
Right? So that's the frustration for me is on one of my jobs. I have 3 because I'm so bored. But on one of my jobs, I look at a lot of these safety data sheets that are involved in transportation-related accidents.
Okay.
So I'm looking at the SDSs, and we're trying to build a database in the company that I'm in, and I keep going in and changing the DOT names because I'm like, these are wrong. Wow. These are not the correct shipping names. And I've had over the years, a couple of clients have actually gotten cited by the DOT because they used the name that was on the SDS. And they're like, but that's the name that was on the SDS. And the DOT's perspective is, yeah, but you were the shipper and it's wrong.
Right.
So here's your fine.
Right.
It's not our fault that you listened to somebody who didn't know what they were doing.
Right.
So that's, again, circling back to our bigger talk of SDS is like, who's doing these things? I kind of chuckled. Somebody at the conference, one of the other presentations said something like, well, the chemists are writing this part and the compliance people are writing this part. I'm like, dude, that's not it. That's not true. It's getting handed to some, peon in the R&D department who has no idea. And that's why you get all this not applicable, not available crap, is because nobody, and that's kind of what I yelled at OSHA about. I'm like, look, stop the charade. Either start taking this seriously and enforcing it and making them worth looking at, or just stop having them. Like, because now it's a joke.
Right.
The idea that an employee could read that document and work safer for having read it is just not. It's not true. It's not accurate.
And another thing I learned today, in fact, I went to a session earlier today that talked about how TSCA is forcing EPA to actually say we want you to write, even though it may not be GHS hazardous, it is TSCA on a TSCA list.
TSCA
right?
regulated.
Yeah, TSCA regulated. Methylene chloride, for example, right? It may not be even enough to even list in Section 3 of the composition, but they want you to put it in other sections.
Well, that and I guess if you get somebody experienced like you and I who know what they're looking at and know to look in all those other places, that's fine. But most people are going to look in Section 3.
Right.
And if it's not listed, they're not reading the fine print in Section 16. Like, wait, benzene, where did that come from? Like,
why
it wasn't listed as an ingredient, yet you're claiming it's in it. So, yeah, my buddy Rich and I routinely will go through the whole SDS and I go, did you see what it said in Section 15? They buried it in the fine print, but damned if it's not in there.
Exactly.
And so
you're absolutely right. Who's looking for that at the right spot at the right time?
Right. And so that's where I feel like if the government's going to do us any favors, that should be what we're enforcing is like some even more consistency. Granted, we got the 16 section, but even more consistency about where things need to be. But it's infinitely better than it used to be because it used to be first aid was in Section 4 and then Section 7 and then Section 2, and you never knew where to find any of this stuff. So it's gotten better, but it's got a ways to go, I think, before we're for sure.
So with that, like, how do you use that or see that in your training classes? Like, so you're going to a site,
it's similar, right? Because I'm training people on the same regulations that I'm overseeing in my compliance jobs. So it's trying to get them to wake up. I've been pushing my clients. I think I told this story yesterday. I kind of waged war with OSHA last year. I sent a kind of nasty email to them and basically said, "Stop the charade," was the title of the email. And finally got a hold of this gal who was somewhat helpful. And her comment was, she said, "Steve, we can't preemptively just start kicking in doors and telling people they have to improve their safety data sheets. But if you file a complaint with OSHA about an SDS, that then gives us the door, that opens the door to let us go in and start looking at it." So what I've been telling most of my clients is, like, you need to start pushing back. Use your buying power, right? If those people want to keep your business, you tell them, look, you either tell me what's in this stuff or I'll take my business elsewhere, right? If nothing else. And if it gets to the extreme, like the SDS I mentioned yesterday in my presentation, which I have an SDS with 7 proprietary ingredients. 7 ingredients they claim they're all proprietary. And they're clearly solvents. I mean, it's so obvious. Down Section 8, it lists the PELs. MEK is clearly one of the chemicals. I mean, there's just no doubt about it. You look at the PELs, you go, well, it's MEK. So yeah, I think if we could get to that point, we'd be substantially better off. But I try and get my clients to, like, look, you need to be the ones, the tip of the spear here of pushing back to these manufacturers going, look, if you want my business, you got to tell me what's in this stuff.
Sure.
Because it's crazy. I had one client, procurement got involved, bean counters got involved, and they switched vendors for their paint thinner to save a penny per pound. 1 penny per pound. Turned out that the paint thinner they had been using didn't contain any listed solvents per EPA, but the new one did.
Okay.
Well, procurement didn't tell anybody down in the plant that they had switched vendors. Paint thinner, who nobody would care.
Right.
So they went like 6 months of shipping waste technically illegally without the proper F codes on them. And the waste disposal company is not properly treating the hazardous waste because they don't know those solvents in there because they're looking at the waste profile, which never got changed when they switched over the paint thinners. So it's stories like that. Those are the things I'm talking about in my training classes to, hey, unfortunately, most of my classes are, here's what somebody else screwed up. Don't be them. Most of my stories are the horror, right?
And learn from it.
Yeah. Learn a lesson. Don't be the next guy that does this stupid thing. Sure.
Well, what about, that one of the big, if you read the preambles of the GHS or the OSHA's HazCom standard, they try to make understandability, comprehensibility to be at the level of like a 6th grade level.
It's scary, isn't it?
Isn't that right?
Yeah. It was funny. I was doing a training class one time and one of my students goes, "You use big words." And I was like, I did. And I'm not, not the chemistry words. I forget what it was, but it was something basic like productivity or something.
Man.
And he was like, "What is that?" I'm like, "Oh, good Lord." So yeah, I mean, that's the other thing is we're working in chemical plants with people who don't have high school degrees. It's not a knock on them not having a high school degree, but you got to work around that.
Right.
Not to mention the whole, multilingual thing. I had an issue plants in Chicago. I won't name names, but OSHA guy really just had an axe to grind with this company. He was really just trying to come at him. One of their employees got hurt, and he was Hispanic. And when they interviewed him and a couple of the other employees, they did the whole, because it's OSHA, they're like, oh, no habla inglés, because they didn't want to have to talk to the guy. And this company, fortunately, has a very strong hiring process policy that you have to at least be not fluent, but I forget the wording they use, but to at least be able to read and write, passable level of English. And so the OSHA guy really wanted to make an issue out of this, and he said, well, he was going to cite them because their safety data sheets weren't in Spanish and that the exit signs weren't in Spanish. And I'm like, dude, slippery slope. Because I don't know if y'all know this, but Spanish is not the only other language spoken in Chicago. We've got Ukrainian Village. We've got, the Polish neighborhoods. It's a melting pot. It's one of the most diverse cities on the planet. I go, if you go down that road, how many different languages are you going to have to argue?
Six exit signs.
Yeah. It'll look like the departure signs at airports all of a sudden. 18 different ways to say hello and welcome. So it is a slippery slope, but it's one company's got to struggle with, right?
Right. Yeah, it's the conundrum we have both as authors and users of the documents. We're seeing this all the time, and how the different levels of improving upon this. It's so incremental, and I get the frustrations both from the user and the authoring side of things. And it's good that we have conversations like this to at least bring it out there.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to be you. I don't want to author these things. Don't. I hope the listeners don't misunderstand. I wouldn't want that job. You couldn't pay me enough to try and write an SDS.
Yeah, and if you're listening to this and not seeing video, I have tomato stains on my back from all the tomatoes thrown at my back today.
Not so much.
Not so much. I try. Yeah. And I can only do a reasonable.
Well, I keep telling Atanu he is not my target. It's his counterparts that I have the issue with. It's not his work. It's everybody else's.
That's
why I point people to him when they ask me about SDSs. I'm like, well, if you want one I would approve, you go to Atanu and I'll look at it. But otherwise,
appreciate
who knows?
That. Yeah. That's what we strive for. So, and how about on a passing note? What would our takeaway be for our listeners? What do you want to single out as the best nugget of learning?
God, for me, the biggest thing is if you're somebody who's working with these chemicals, don't take that lightly. You have to sit through class and you kind of roll your eyes. And, my challenge whenever I do a HazCom training class is I always tell my students, if I can get just one of you to read that document after you walk out of here, you might be shocked at some of the things you learn, right? Because we teach them what they are, but we're not really, most HazCom classes are, more tailgate. Hey, here's where the book is. If you want to read it, kind of thing. And, if we could get the workforce to take it more seriously, then maybe they would have more questions, and it would force us all to kind of step up our collective game to be better at explaining things, to your point, at their level,
right,
in a way that they understand it.
To achieve communication.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that is the point, right? Hazard communication. That's it's in the name.
Name, right? In the standard, right?
It's right
in the
there.
Bible, the book of OSHA.
The book of OSHA. That's right.
Well, on that note, it's been a pleasure having you.
Thanks.
And, I'd love to have you another time.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Anytime.
And for more about Steve, our guest today, we visit hackyourhazcom.com. He'll have his contact information and other ways to reach out.
Okay.
Thank you again for your time.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. It was fun.
All right.
Take care.
Take care.